Okay, Bill, thank you. All yours, sir.
Okay, thank you. Let me try to get my presentation up and running. So are you looking at a blue screen now?
No, we're still looking at your face.
You're still looking at my face. Okay. Now
And Lex and Esty.
I hope I don't disconnect this, because if I disconnect this, then I will come back if I disconnect this. But let me try this. Now, are you looking at a blue screen?
Yeah, we're looking at your now that's great. Thanks, Bill. That's your
Okay,
presentation.
sounds good. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I want to talk with you today about a topic that is a very important topic, but in many respects, text has been the elephant in the room. That it's been in the room, but people have been ignoring it for years and years, and that's a shame. So let's talk about what you can do about text analytics today. First off, I want to begin with the observation that in most corporations, the vast majority of information in the corporation is in the form of text. However, nobody looks at it, and that's a crime. That's a criminal offense. Why? Because there's a lot of important information locked up in text. And there's a lot of reasons that people give for not looking at text. There are too many documents to be read. It's simply impossible for a human being to understand all of those documents. So, what kind of information do you find in text? What is it that corporations are ignoring? They're ignoring such important things as call centers, where people call into the corporation and have a conversation about whatever it is the corporation does. Medical records. Medical records are a special case, and we'll talk about them in a minute. But medical records have got some very special and important uses. Contracts, internet, emails, surveys, depositions, insurance claims, warranty claims, and many, many more places. And all of this information is going through the corporation without anybody in the corporation ever understanding in a methodical fashion what we do with it. So I don't think there's any question that there's a tremendous amount of important information in the corporation that simply never, ever gets looked at. So, what are the challenges with text? Why is it that corporations ignore text? There's a lot of reasons, and all of these reasons are valid. First off, language is complex. Language is kind of interesting because when we are a young child, the first thing we learn is sounds, and then we start typically to learn the alphabet, and then we start to learn words, and then how to spell words, and then how to put sentences together. And the truth of the matter is, our brains are filled with complex thoughts in order to speak or write a language. Second thing, text exists in many formats. There's voice text. There's text on medical records. There's all kinds of text that exist out there. A third complicating factor is a lot of text is blather. It's not relevant to the processing that we want to do. Text is in different languages. English language is a great language, but it's hardly the only language that's out there. Furthermore, there's nothing that's uniform in text. One of the big ones for the computer is database management systems do not handle text well or at all. Other things, sarcasm is hard to detect. Tone of voice is difficult to detect. Handwriting is hard to work with. Different fonts cause problems. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of problems and a lot of reasons why trying to deal with text is a real challenge. So what we find is that on the one hand, there's a great value in looking at text. On the other hand, it's difficult to get to. It's like the miners on the east coast of the United States in 1848. In 1848, they discovered gold in California, and all of a sudden, all of these people on the east coast of the United States wanted to get to the west coast. And text is the same way. There's a lot of value wrapped up in text, but trying to get to text is a real challenge. So let's take a look at some of the reasons why we should be looking at text. Let's start with medical records. If you've ever looked at a medical record is in the form of text. Now, what's that good for? That's good for one doctor and one patient. So when you go into your doctor's office, the doctor can read what your previous visit to the doctor was like, and it's for one patient. And so medical records are in the form of text. However, uh, we find out that it's not enough just to look at one patient at a time. Being able or needing to look at 100,000 patients at a time is another very valid form of looking at medical records. And if you say, why would you want to look at 100,000 patients at a time? The answer is, in this day and age of COVID, that's exactly what we need to do. That we've got to be able to examine what's going on with 100,000 patients and say, gee, here are the factors that relate to real problems with this pandemic or not. And in order to do that, we've got to look at 100,000 patients at once. So one really important thing doesn't have anything to do with business. It has to do with health. It has to do with the way you breathe and the way your heart beats and things like that, which I hope everybody in this world is interested in. So one reason to deal with text is the ability to deal with medical records. Another reason why we should deal with text is because of call center conversations. Many corporations have call centers. This is where a random person can call up a number and talk to a representative of the corporation. And in these conversations is a huge amount of valuable information. And when we find that we look at these pieces of information, they're recorded on voice transcriptions. And we find that, however, that all of these conversations are, not surprisingly, in the form of text. And so, what do corporations do with their call center today? They throw these conversations away. This is similar or equivalent to taking money and throwing money in the garbage or burning money. And I suggest that you've got something better to do with your money than throw it away. But that's exactly what corporations are doing today. And why are they doing it? Because the conversations they're having are in the form of text and they don't know how to handle text. Another place where we find text that's really important is the internet and email. And why is that important? Well, if you go out to the internet, you find that people discuss companies and products all of the time. That they sit there and talk about one thing or talk about the other. Now, these discussions are open to anybody. Anybody can go out to the internet and read the discussions. And what do corporations do with this important information? They throw it away. And so here at the bottom, we have a picture of a corporation busily handling their internet information. And what we find is a blank room because nobody is doing anything with it. And again, this is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to looking at what's in your what value there is in text today. So I hope you agree with me that, gee, Bill, corporations are not behaving in a terribly responsible fashion by ignoring text. So Another place where, and this one's kind of funny, corporate contracts. When we first started, we went to executives, and I've stood in front of executives on many occasions and said, okay, how many executives in your corporation understand what is in your corporate contracts? And to date, not one executive has ever raised their hand and said, we understand what's in our corporate contracts. And I said, well, I guess I'm kind of confused then. You guys are executives, aren't you? And oh yeah, we're executives. And as an executive, it's your job to understand the liabilities of what's going on in your corporation. Oh yeah, we understand liability. Well, I guess I'm really confused. How can you tell me that you understand liability in your corporation and you don't understand contracts? Don't you think that there's liability in your corporate contracts? And that's a stupid question because that's what contracts do. Contracts manage that liability. And so when you talk to executives about corporate contracts, you get, well, Bill, we have millions of them. We can't possibly understand what's in millions of these things. Or you get, gee, Bill, we've run our company this way for 50 years and we haven't needed to understand what's in our contracts yet. And so I have to tell you that there is a lot of money and opportunity tied up in corporate contracts that no one is looking at. So you say, gee, Bill, this is all kind of interesting because yes, indeed, I do agree with you. There's a lot of valuable information wrapped up in text that nobody is looking at. So how have we in the past tried to approach textual analytics? Well, and I remember NLP, natural language processing. NLP is something that I'll tell you how old it is. I studied it in college, and it's been a long time since I've been in college. But NLP, natural language processing, is what people says. Well, Bill, okay, let's go look at text and do something about it. Let's bring in NLP. And this is what most people come along and talk about when it comes to managing text. And what do they find? They find out that the NLP approach takes huge amounts of time and resources. The worst case I've seen is it took 10 years for a company to use NLP to try to understand what was in their approach. So what do you do when you get NLP? You typically model the business environment, customize the model, bring in lots of expensive, high-priced consultants, ingest the data, transform the data, and let the customer use the model to access data. This is what it takes to typically to do NLP. Takes a minimum of 6 months to 2 years time. And furthermore, it costs a lot of money to do this. So this is what we've tried to address text with in the past. And I'm going to tell you right now, NLP is good for studying language. If what you want to do is study language, then I got news for you. NLP is absolutely what you want to do. But if you want to start to use textual analytics in your organization, NLP is expensive. It's very complex, and it's a gruesome process to go through. So you say, okay, Bill, thanks for telling me this. What can you prove this to me? Well, let me tell you, there's been a couple of major failures with NLP in the world. Let's start with IBM Watson. I don't know if you've heard of IBM Watson, but a long time ago, IBM Watson said, we're going to start to address text. And now, I don't know if this show is familiar in South Africa, but there's a famous show in the United States called Jeopardy, in which different contestants try to match wits with other contestants. And they took two of the smartest people on earth, Ken Jennings and Roger Craig, and matched them against the NLP IBM Watson machine. And the IBM Watson machine won. It was very good for recalling lots and lots of details. And so IBM got a lot of exposure and a lot of press on how wonderful IBM Watson was. And then IBM tried to turn NLP into solving business problems. Well, business problems are not the same thing as recall problems, which is what Jeopardy is all about. And so it is estimated that IBM has spent over $2 billion on the development of IBM Watson. And I don't know if you follow the news, but about 4 or 5 months ago, IBM sold off Watson and abandoned the project. They found out they couldn't do it. So this is, you talk about, does your company have $2 billion to spend on NLP in 10 years' time? Well, maybe you do, but there's got to be a better way. So you find out that NLP is something that is marked with, and by the way, that's not the only failure. There are other organizations and companies that have tried to make NLP work, and they have never gotten anywhere. So, what is the problem? Well, the problem is that NLP was designed not to be a commercial product. It was designed for studying data. It was designed for data scientists, but in terms of actually using a product for taking your corporate data and turning it into something that can be done analytically, that NLP was not designed for this. So there is an alternative to NLP. There is now a commercial product. It's called Textual ETL. It's in the marketplace, and we're doing some rather amazing things. So I want to tell you now a little bit about Textual ETL and what it can do for you. Textual ETL is the opposite of NLP. Whereas NLP is complex, textual ETL is simple. Whereas NLP is expensive, textual ETL is inexpensive. Whereas NLP is slow, textual ETL is fast. And textual ETL can run on the cloud or on premise. Either one. Now, on cloud or on premise, let me briefly discuss that. A lot of people like to run on the cloud for a variety of reasons. Simplicity, some of the operational characteristics, whatever. On the other hand, some organizations can't operate on the cloud. For example, in the United States, healthcare organizations cannot operate on the cloud because of the security required for the data. And military organizations also will not run on the cloud for the same reason. So most people want to run on the cloud. Some people cannot run on the cloud and have to run it on premise. So textual ETL is something that runs in either place. We can satisfy either of your needs. How long does it typically take to do textual analytics? It typically takes 3 to 4 hours, not days, not months, not years. It takes a number of hours. We typically do analytical processing in a day's time. So it has taken the time required for analytical processing, and we have greatly compressed it and made it simplified. In order to process text, textual ETL makes use of taxonomies and ontologies. I don't know, when people start to deal with data, they typically come from a background where data modeling is something that people do. Now, a data model, let me tell you, I'm a big fan of data modeling. I've done data modeling all my life, our professional life, and we want to do data models. But for a variety of reasons, data models don't fit text. It's like taking the instructions for driving a car and trying to fly an airplane. You're going to get in trouble if you try to take instructions on how to drive a car and how to fly an airplane. So that then is a little conversation about taxonomies. So these taxonomies then are part of the fuel that drives textual ETL. Textual ETL has a library, has available to us a library of about 75,000 taxonomies. So if you come to us and say, gee, Bill, we're a mining company, and you say, okay, that's fine. Or, gee, Bill, we are a military organization. No problem. We've got a taxonomy for that. Now, I'm not going to say that we've got a taxonomy for everything on the earth, but we've got 75,000 of them, and you would be hard pressed to find something we don't have a taxonomy for. So what that means is that when you decide to start to use textual ETL, you can use it immediately. Uh, and so you don't have to spend 6 months building a taxonomy. We have them available to us at a moment's notice. So some of the kinds of things we have taxonomies for are such things as medicine, oil and gas, transportation, airlines, retailing, banking, finance, insurance, manufacturing, entertainment, hospitality, restaurant chain, hotel chain, chemical engineering, aeronautical engineering, bus transportation, police and law enforcement, military, and many, many more. And again, what's the importance of taxonomies? It means that when you want to do text analytics, you don't have to go and build a taxonomy. You can simply ask us for one, and we can go find it in our library for you. And how long does that take? I don't know, half an hour, maybe something like that. And compared to building the taxonomy, a half an hour is instantaneous, or as close to instantaneous as you can get. In addition to textual ETL operating and using taxonomies and ontologies, we also do something called in. Pardon me. Excuse me. 1 second. I need to get some water.
Sorry, Bill, whilst you're having some water, there are a few questions. Should we save them till the end of the talk, or can you have them now?
I would prefer to save them to the end of the talk, but
Okay,
save them, and we will
fantastic.
try to answer as many as we can. Okay, in addition to taxonomies, when you get into text, you find out that you need a lot of ways to address everything in text. We also do something called inline contextualization. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought about identifying a person's name in a document. That turns out that identifying a person's name in a document is actually really difficult to do. And why is that? That's because there are many, many first names, but there are an effectively infinite number of last names. And so the way one way we handle it several ways, but one way we handle it is to identify a beginning delimiter, an ending delimiter, and then take what's between the delimiters and identify that as the customer name. So that's a inline contextualization is a component that is complementary to taxonomies and ontologies. And so that's a little bit about how textual ETL works. Now we do proof of concepts. Let me talk about proof of concepts. Why do we do proof of concepts? We do proof of concepts because people, when they first get into textual analytics, don't know what they're getting into. It's like anything else in life, when you do it the first time, you're kind of lost. You don't know what to expect. Like getting married, for example. The first week or two of getting married, you learn a lot about your partner their sleeping habits, their eating habits, and a bunch of other things. And so a proof of concept, people have never done this before, and so we don't insist, but it always happens. People say, "Gee, I want to see what I'm getting before I uh, jump in and start to use this thing." And so, with that in mind, we typically do what's called a proof of concept, simply because people need that to understand uh, what they need to, what's going on here, because it's hard for them to visualize. Gee, text analytics. That sounds interesting, but what does that really mean to me and my organization? So that's why we do proof of concepts. So how long does it take to do a proof of concept? Given that we have the taxonomies and ontologies available to us that are already built, the first thing we have to do is determine the business of the client. Or what are you? Are you an engineer? Are you a administrator? Are you an accountant? What are you? We then go find the taxonomy that fits, and then we do a little bit of customization. The customization of the taxonomy means that we take our generic taxonomies and we customize it. And this typically takes a couple of hours. And then we ingest the text. What do I mean by ingest the text? Some text is out there and available and doesn't require any work for ingestion, but other text does require significant work. For example, voice transcription. If what you're looking for is recorded on voice, we've got to go through something called voice transcription before we can start to handle the text as text. So that's the ingestion process. That typically takes 2 to 3 hours. How long to process the text? Well, this depends on how much text you have, but typically 5 to 10 minutes to process it. To develop the databases, after we process the text, it's a matter of minutes before we develop the database. And then if you want a knowledge graph or visualization, that typically takes 10 minutes or so. So we tell people we get the proof of concept by 8 a.m. and we get it out to you by 4 p.m. Now, if you were to take these numbers and compare it to NLP, you would find that it's no contest. It would be like me. I'm an old guy trying to race one of the Olympic sprinters. It wouldn't be a pretty thing to look at because there's no way that I could ever keep up with an Olympic sprinter. It wouldn't be it'd be a wonder if I could get to the finish line in any shape at all. So this is a typical amount of time that it takes to do a proof of concept. Once we have created the database for you, we can take the results and produce all kinds of analytical visualizations. One of them that's popular in this day and age is something called a knowledge graph. Another thing, we can produce a dashboard that we are. Oh, let me say just a few words about the technology we operate. You say, gee, Bill, Textual ETL creates a database. What kind of database? We can create any kind of database that you want. You want it in Oracle, you want it in SQL Server, you want it in Teradata, you want it in Hadoop, you name it, you tell us how you want your data put out, and we'll put it out there. We are agnostic to it. As far as the input is concerned, the only requirement we have for input is that the input be in the form of text. But if it's in the form of text, we can take input from anywhere. You know, anywhere is a dangerous word because uh, you say, I'm sure that somewhere in the world there's text that we can't handle. In fact, I can give you one example of text we can't handle, and that's handwriting. We have yet to find a way to take handwritten notes and turn them into something useful. If we're going to take text in, it's got to be in a standard electronic text format in a font. But other than that, there's no, we can take it from IBM, we can take it from Microsoft, We can take it from wherever you want to give it to us. We can read paper and do optical character recognition. We can do voice transcription and take it from voices. It doesn't matter where the text comes from. So this is a little bit about how things operate and the technology itself. So, so what we find is that people want it either on the cloud or on premise. We're able to handle that. Proof of concept for free. Let me talk about proof of concept for free. Under normal circumstances, we don't charge anything for proof of concept. Now, I have to tell you, we're starting to do so many proof of concepts that it may be a while before we can get around to yours, but because we can only handle so many proof of concepts at a time, and already things are backing up, which means business is good for us, but it also means it is going to take a while before we can get around to it. But we do it for free. When also one other proviso. One time we advertised we did a proof of concept for free, and somebody gave us 3 terabytes of data. And we said to the gentleman, when we do proof of concept, that's really for a sampling of your data, not all of your data. I said, we can do 3 terabytes of data, but we are going to have to charge you for it because that's not a proof of concept, that's an actual project. Any database management system, we work with all sorts of data. In terms of the input and output, we handle such things as JSON, Parquet, and all of the standard formats for data. The output, we can produce really 3 kinds of output for you: knowledge graphs, dashboards, or simple databases. As far as knowledge graphs go, we work with Neo4j and we work with TigerGraph, and we work with both of those technologies. Any volume of data, we can handle any volume of data you want. However, and see the little asterisk there, if you give us a really large amount of data, we've got to do parallel processing on it. But once you give us, say, 10 terabytes of data, what we're going to do with it is break those 10 terabytes into separate sections and run them on parallel processors. So we can handle any volume of data, but the way that we do it is through parallel processes. Languages. Languages are one of the consideration of textual analytics. Right now, we operate in English, Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, German, Arabic, let me this, Arabic, Italian, Dutch, and other languages. We don't operate currently in the Oriental languages, Kanji, Mandarin, and Korean. We know that we can, but it's going to take us a conversion effort, and we need to have somebody pay us to do that. We can understand all forms of text, slang, comments, understood, and so forth. In addition to going to the cloud, we're compatible with Databricks and Snowflake. So this is some of the things to think about as you consider doing textual ETL. Now, one of the nice things about textual ETL is the nature of text analytics is it's an iterative process. I guarantee you, and we've done this a lot of times, I guarantee you that when you get your first results back from textual ETL, you're going to say, well, this is interesting, but now that I see what can be done, here's what I really want. And so we understand that having different iterations is a part of the process. And again, I would faint if you gave us a project to do and you got it all right the first time. That just doesn't happen. And so when you do textual ETL, given the speed with which you can do textual ETL, iterative processing is actually very easy to do. Why? Because it's so fast to do textual ETL. If you were to consider NLP processing, where it takes 6 months to a year, to do one iteration, iterative processing is very difficult to do with NLP. So let me now jump around a little bit for you. We mentioned earlier that there's a lot of gold in California. And if you're sitting there on the East Coast wanting to get to California, how do you get to California? Well, one way to get to California is through a wagon train. This is what our forefathers did 100 or so years ago. And as you got onto your wagon train, on the East Coast and headed for California, what did you face? You faced Indians that wanted to kill you, snow in the California mountains, thirst in the desert, rattlesnakes, broken wagon wheels. You had to cross the Rocky Mountains, and that was no small thing. You had to cross rivers. You had the Grand Canyon of Arizona, and plenty of more obstacles. And it was a normal thing for you to leave the East Coast 1 year and arrive in California a year later, if you didn't die along the way. And by the way, a lot of pioneers did die along the way. So this is what happens when you have to try to get to the gold in California. On the other hand, in today's world, you simply go to the airport, buy an airplane ticket, get on the plane, and about 4 hours later, you're in California. So I want to ask you, as you get ready to do textual analytics, which journey do you want to take? Do you want to take NLP or do you want to take textual ETL? The choice is yours. And let me point out one other thing. If you take the wagon train, you're going to find out that the people that took the plane have been in California for a year and have found all of the gold already. So the choice is yours. When you want to do textual analytics, how do you want to get there? Do you want to try to take the NLP approach or the textual ETL approach? And I think it only makes sense to take the textual ETL approach. Now, in order to further describe to people how all of this happens, we have what we call a paint by the numbers book. It's an ebook and it's for free. All you have to do is go to our website, forestrimtech.com, look for ebook, and you will find directions. And if you sign up for a book, you will quickly find out. I have the book sent to you at the email address that you had it sent to. The textual analytics book, Simplified, is paint by the numbers. It says, okay, here's the first step. Here's the things to think about in the first step. Here's the second step. Here are the things to think about in the second step. And so we tried to, and the reason why we tried to make it simple is because NLP is so dadgummit, so hard to do. And we don't think it, let me tell you something. I can do, and I have regularly do, textual analytics in a day. We go from raw text to an analytical results in a day's time. And we do it all the time. And for people that struggle with NLP, they need to know that there's a better way. So if you're interested in more details in how do you actually do all of this stuff, you can get an instruction manual for free by going to our website. And so now we are ending our presentation. I am going to take questions now.
Well, thanks very much. So the first question is from Esty, and Esty asked, is it possible to import your own ontology taxonomy? Or, for example, if there's an existing taxonomy like a sustainability taxonomy, would you be comfortable? Is it possible to import it into your system?
Yes, it is. We do that on a regular basis. So the answer is yes. If you already, now I have to tell you, that's kind of an unusual question because most people don't have taxonomies. But if by some chance you have a taxonomy, the answer is absolutely yes.
Fantastic. Yes, I know. I think We gave Esti the advice to start looking at taxonomy some time back after your course. So it's all because of you.
Okay.
Now, the other one is from Dion Bands. Will knowledge graphs be similar to engrams, or will it need Neo4j as a property graph so that one can use Bloom, etc., or on this to have the business users as word questions on the data? Dion, I'm not sure whether I conveyed that message correctly. I'm not sure if I fully understand it.
We work with TigerGraph and Neo4j, and we don't do knowledge graphs. We supply the information that knowledge graphs that Neo4j uses to create the knowledge graph. And so anything beyond a knowledge graph, engrams, I would have to look at this more in depth. But in general, when you talk about knowledge graphs, there really are two aspects to creating a knowledge graph. There's the collection and organization of the data, and then there's the creation of the knowledge graph. We don't do the creation of the knowledge graph. Neo4j and TigerGraph do an excellent job of that, and we don't want to repeat what they've done. What we do is the front end. We collect the data, we organize, we put it into a form that a knowledge graph can use. So I hope that answers the question.
Dion, did that answer your question, sir?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay. Mohammed, do you have your hand up?
Yes. Thank you, Howard, for giving me this opportunity. Actually, I was driving, but because of Great Bill today is here, I'm in the car and I'm enjoying this great session actually because he's a great mentor. His life case is study, because he sacrificed his life sharing the knowledge and teaching people about the data. That he's the guru of the data and the data house, from the data house to the data lake house. I keep following him more and more about the data lake house and the book of the data lake house, and then the textual analytics. And I believe another success story or a case story from our mentor is that the first paper I think was wrote about the textual ETL was in the early of the end of the 1890s, I think so. And it was a dream that is now actual truth happening. Now we have the solution after these years for the textual analytics, and I'm grateful to be here with Bill. My question was about is that the big data platforms and Hadoop is the more optimum solutions for storing this kind of data format, this text data format, and also in the forms of this text where we will need to make like rules for the knowledge bases. Is it will be easy after that to customize our taxonomies and ontologies? And thank you so much.
Surely. Let me react to what you said. First off, big data is not a database management system. It's a storage mechanism. And you put data into big data, and you still need to understand and organize the data. And that's what we do. So we are very complementary to big data. So that's that. So anyway, anyway, um, that's who we are and what we do, and so big data is the ocean, and we are the land. They complement each other. They don't conflict with each other.
That answer your question, sir? Okay, just one more question in Rama, and then we'll get to Lex. Bill Rama is asking, his comments are following. I know in traditional data warehousing, you would have relationships, entities in the data models. Do taxonomies also have relationships modeled with keys, or is their data specially modeled? And how complex is it to organize the data in the database, and how easily can that data be queried?
Okay, this is actually a quite complex subject. Data models have keys and attributes and things like that. When you get into text, the first complicating factor of text is if you look just at text, you don't do anything. In order to look at text and make sense of it, you've also got to look at context. And so text without context is meaningless. And that's the first factor. Now, there is context in a data model, but it appears in a very, very different way and different format. But there are other aspects of the data model and the taxonomies that are different as well. The best way to describe it is a data model is internally looking. You take your organization and look internally at the organization and how data is organized. The taxonomy is external facing. The taxonomy looks at the world and says, gee, how does the world view this? And there's a very different understanding of something that's internal versus something that's external. And when people have tried to take data modeling activities and apply them to taxonomies, they ultimately fail. I mean, I'm not going to tell you that it can't work, but I'm going to tell you I've never seen it work. And there are good reasons why, because a data model is fundamentally different from a taxonomy. And so anyway, that's a little bit about that subject. Now there are relationships in a taxonomy that let's take the countries of the world. We have England, we have Germany, we have South Africa, we have the United States. We have another taxonomy for cities, and we have the cities of Johannesburg, Cape Town, Pretoria, and other places like that. So there's a relationship between Cape Town, Pretoria, and Johannesburg and South Africa. And then we could go even further. We could take the streets in Cape Town, and I don't know the names of streets in Cape Town, but we could say, okay, here are the streets in Cape Town, and they relate to Cape Town. So there are interrelationships of data in a taxonomy, but even there, they're a little bit different from the kind of relationships that we're used to in a data model. So as one piece of advice to you, when, I have to tell you, when I first started doing this, I came from a data modeling background, and I got into this, and I looked at taxonomies, and I'll tell you what I felt like. I felt like a fish out of water. I kept saying, well, where's my keys? Where are my attributes? And they're not there. They are not there. And so I was like a fish flopping on the bank of the shore, looking for my water, but there was no water there. And it takes when you start to make the transition from looking at classical data management and looking at textual management, you find that at first you're very uncomfortable because many of the rules that you've been looking for and many of the things that you thought were established and set in concrete are not there. And on the other hand, there are other things that are there that you've never seen before. So it's a different world you go into, and a lot of people have psychologically a difficult time going from one world into the other. So anyway, that's a very interesting subject, and I have to tell you, we could go on for another hour on the subject because there's a lot of other aspects to it.
Thanks, Bill. I know Lex had his hand up, but he put it down. Lex, did they answer your question?
If it's still possible, thank you, Bill, for your timely presentation. I've been an admirer for your work for many years now. What I understood from your story is that ETL basically is trying to solve the problem of the unstructured data in the text after the fact has occurred.
Yep.
Do you also have an idea or a solution for how do we prevent that it's being created in the first place?
Okay, we're pretty good, but we can't predict the future. And the best that we can do is quickly look at what's there. But in terms of understanding what's to come an hour from now or a day from now, that I don't know how we do that. And by the way, if we can figure out how to do that, we can make a lot of money. But but no, we don't look into the future. Now, what we do is with textual ETL, we take essentially unstructured data and create a structure for it, so that the structure that we create, and people say, "Gee, Bill, you really love structured data." No, I don't particularly like structured data. Anything more, I don't dislike it, but I'm not in love with structured data. But I can tell you this: the analytical engines of the world expect structured data. When you look at Tableau, when you look at Click, when you look at Power BI, when you look at any of the tools out there that we typically do analytics with, they expect a structured format. So what we do is we're able to take the text, put the text into a structured format that's acceptable to the analytical tools of the world.
Lex, maybe if I could ask you a question just from a clarity point of view. Um, Bill, I understand that you can, for example, call centers or whatever it is, you can extract the data from the engagement or whatever chat it is, and you can load it into structural analytical tools to predict whether this customer may terminate their relationship based on historical events, right? So is that not an option that you can make use of?
You can make an educated guess.
Yeah,
Can you
sure.
predict? No. Can you make an educated guess? Yes.
Right.
And so saying that you can predict something is dangerous because I
Sure.
don't in this world I don't know anybody that can can anybody have predicted COVID? I mean, 2 years ago we were sitting here in the world happily doing our own thing. Then all of a sudden we had this dread disease that nobody had ever heard of. So no, we don't predict things, but we can make an educated guess.
Yeah, there's always a probability that you're wrong, but if those patterns get stronger and stronger, then, and if you constantly look at the type of engagement that the customers have, one would think that you're getting better and better.
Yes.
Fantastic. Lex, I'm not sure whether that was the question or did I misinterpret it?
No, I was actually looking for a solution for a pre-established harmony, that we don't create harmony after the fact has occurred. But are you aware of a type of solution that has this pre-established harmony?
I'm not aware of a solution that can do that.
Okay. All right, I've got one other question. I've got one person's hand up. Patrick, yes, sir.
Hello everyone. Mine's a bit of a comment really on the subject of predictability and stuff. I have a use case from my current client. For example, the South African mining industry is trying to automate a lot of processes underground. So that's an area which is quite limited in terms of hardware. Take down there and do some sort of machine learning or whatever. So it goes back to the point that you need enough data points to establish that predictability. And in a case where your variables are changing up almost in a second, becomes a bit hard. So I think in the gentleman's defense, Bill will build this level of predictability as per use case. As long as you can assign some sort of accuracy from it, and you can undertake production and duplicate as you go along, trying to iterate to your training samples, if I may say. It's quite a stressful thing to, because every client wants some predictability. The mining industry wants us to predict whether or false would best in day 1 or 2 or in 2 hours. We are telling them we need to do enough tests to study the dynamic environment, which is rock mechanics and a lot of variable factors around it. So I'm just sharing that bit of what's called frustration in terms of what goes into establishing that predictability, which everyone is hopefully trying to get to.
What textual ETL can do is add for your points of predictability. That right now, most people don't really pay any attention to what's in text. And once you start paying attention to what's in text, you now increase your probability of having an accurate prediction, because now you've got points that you wouldn't have otherwise have.
Okay, there's a question from Mark Goodman. Is the textual ETL capability available as a hosted or managed service or a module, e.g. through Databricks, or does one have to go through the front end?
Okay, the way we operate is on the cloud. We arrange for you to send your data to the cloud. We process it and give you your results back. If you bring it in-house on the on-premise solution, it's a bit more robust because once you have it in your shop, you can do anything you want to with it. And you can do anything you want to with it. But essentially, it works like this: you pass data to us, you tell us about the data, what you want processed, we take it, we process it, and give you your results. And you can package that however you want to package it.
Mark, did that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. But it does raise a follow-up question.
Right.
What about the sensitivity aspects about some of the information? Where's the information stored? Is it deleted after processing? What about boundaries, cross-boundary context, or border context not being allowed to transfer?
So, from a data privacy point of view.
Correct.
If you have great security and privacy concerns, then you can process it on premise, and it never leaves anywhere you don't want it to get to. You're in control of it. If you put it on the cloud, we take your information in the cloud, we process it, but we don't store it on the cloud. So we're not in the business of pirating your information, but for one brief moment, we have to have your information to process it accurately. But again, we don't store it and nobody can access it. But again, if that bothers you and that is a worry to you, then you can run it on premise and you are in complete control of the access storage of the data itself.
Right. Thanks, Bill.
Surely.
Thank you, Mark. And now there's a question from Christopher. Christopher, you have your hand up? I'm not sure what's happening there. Christopher, when you...
Now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you.
Cheers,
I'm
Lex.
sorry. I'm sorry. So I was thanking you for the opportunity and for as well the seminar or the presentation. A quick question to Bill. And I'm sorry that it has risen just in the last minutes after you have now explained well about the presentation. So here comes the use of the ETL in the normal life, just a job. For example, at my job and my work, we have like a scenario of matching the mentors to mentees when it comes to the mentorship program. So we prepared a questionnaire for mentees, another questionnaire for mentors that will collect different datas to which we will look where the similarity will come from so that we can match correctly appropriately the mentees to the mentor. So here comes, I was asking myself, as someone who meets the regular uh, problems like these ones where we cannot find the accurate, let's say, software, even Power BI cannot I have realized that Power BI cannot help much of that because sometimes you have some customized principles you are basing on. For example, maybe the two main are the background as well as the areas of interest when it comes to mentorship. We just measure those two principally. Maybe another one might consider the time difference between a mentor and mentees when they are not in the same time zone. So me, I was wanting to ask, with those, with that huge data set or those criteria, how can textual ETL can help us just organize them in order to avoid the human bias? Because you understand that there is no any other solution other than processing them manually. So for me, I had just thought maybe because of Bill is really ahead of us in experience, can give us a scenario because he might have came across one day or in one or another way. So I don't know if I hit to the point, but I asked them myself after Bill has explained just everything about the ETL. Thank you.
Let me try to answer your question, but there's a lot of facets to it. The first thing that comes to mind is when we are doing textual ETL, we don't process certain kinds of text. Let me give you an example. If I were to say to you, I love you, or I love you, the way you put emphasis on the words brings different meaning. I love you means that nobody else in the world loves you. I love you doesn't mean that I like you, it means I love you. I love you. I don't love your neighbor, I don't love your wife, your dog, I love you. And so, in terms of getting emphasis, we don't do that. We only are subject to the words "I love you," and so we don't understand any kind of emotional aspect of what's being said. That's one thing. Now another thing, when people are processing surveys and lists of words and whatever, oftentimes the text that accompanies the surveys are something that are more important than what the person has said in the survey, and that we do, and we're quite good at it. So in terms of gathering side comments, we can do that. A third thing that came to mind as you were talking is we do have the capability to do something kind of unusual. We can read one word and apply it to our database as another word. So that let me tell you where that comes in. When you deal, for example, in the field of medicine, the people in England have one set of terminology for procedures and for medications and whatever. The people in Germany have another whole set of way of describing that. And the people in Australia have yet another way of describing the same thing. So when you're doing medical research, the need for being able to do research in England Germany, and Australia is very difficult because people are talking about the same thing, but they're calling it something different. So one of the capabilities that we have is the capability of organizing all of that, that we can read the term they use in England and convert it to the term they use in Australia. So that when you're doing research on text, you're able to have, in addition to everything else, the text standardized so that you can look at it that way. So those are some of the thoughts that I was thinking about as you were talking. I hope that in there somewhere, I've answered your question.
Thanks, Bill.
Actually, you have answered it. Thank you so much. I was thinking the same, but I could not believe myself because I was waiting for a word from an expert. But thank you so much.
Thanks, Christopher. Bill, do you have some more time? There are a few other questions, but I just wanted to make sure that you've got some time to answer the question.
I've got about 10 more minutes.
Okay, let's go then. So there's one, I'm going to get to Esty, but there was one, someone asked, can textual ETL be used in streaming?
No. Textual ETL captures your data and we process it sequentially in, if you will, a batch mode. Now, we can do this very quickly, and if you want it to be used in streaming, we can arrange for it to be run in parallel so that it looks like streaming, but no, we have to look at things in clumps of data. We can't do it directly online.
Right, right. Dion, does that answer your question? I think it does.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you. Esty, your hand's up.
Me thinking so you might already have answered it now, but so our use case, we have an ontology, taxonomy, type of structure. Now somebody wants to extend this ontology and we want to make sure that they don't add something that's there already. And this ontology has the lowest level is it's not just a word, like it's an entire paragraph that gets added. Would textual ETL help for that, or would we still need something else to compare and see if the intent almost is the same?
At the moment that you're adding the term, if it already exists, we'll tell you that. So we're not going to let you add the same term twice or duplicate what somebody else has done. So we have that capability.
And in terms of the intent, so there might be, so somebody talks about salaries, for example, but in the ontology, there's something about wages. So that is, it's related. So to have perhaps say to a human, okay, these look kind of similar to what you want to add. Is it a completely new one? Like, is there that type of interaction with textual ETL?
Yes, there is. Now let me tell you, in the background of textual ETL, we have a taxonomy manager. We normally don't, the taxonomy manager is not made for public consumption. It's what we use to manage our taxonomies internally. And what you're describing is a function. So typically, we would give you the capability indirectly of using our taxonomy manager. And once you do that, yes, you can do exactly what you've described.
Cool.
But there's really two technologies here. There's the taxonomy management taxonomy, which is in the background, because you say, gee, Bill, how in the world do you manage 75,000 taxonomies? I have news for you. That's not easy to do. So we had to develop our own technology for managing and building those taxonomies. What you see as a user is textual ETL, which is the usage of those taxonomies, not necessarily the management of them.
Cool.
And Esty, just to confirm, I think you were sort of, what Dion was talking about is semantic similarity or synonyms within the different words. So, and I know that Bill handles that as well. Not so, Bill?
Yes. Absolutely.
Cool.
Alrighty. Is there any other questions? Anybody else have a question? Bill, I think you've managed to answer all the questions before your 10 minutes were up.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Sounds good to me.
Well, thank you once again. It's really been good to hear you and hear what you're doing, and we'll be in touch in future.
Sounds good. Thank you, Howard. Thank you, everybody. Nice talking to you.
Cheers,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.